Ultimately, outside of sport, and even sometimes in sport, that idea, that sport's definition of toughness can be kind of toxic. Hi guys, and welcome to Retired College Athletes. I'm Sydney Mary, and this is a platform designed to inspire and inform current and former athletes using stories from retired college athletes. Let's go ahead and get into today's video. So today we're talking about 3 things that you often learn in sport that do not translate very well to the rest of your life. The reason why we're talking about this though is because I noticed oftentimes that some of the things that worked really well in my sport in terms of like toughness and making sure that I would perform at a high level does not actually work in my life today. I often found myself getting really frustrated by trying to implement these things that I learned in sport into my life and realizing that it's just not working. And so we're gonna go over those 3 things. If you know of any others, if you agree, please feel free to comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. The first thing is perfectionism. And if you're coming from a healthy program, you probably weren't striving for perfection, but I think we seek out perfection in many different ways as athletes. We often are practicing to make sure that we are making less mistakes, that we're working towards perfecting our drills or whatever we're working on. We're often going to film to make sure that we are messing up less on the things that we messed up on in previous games. These are all things that we're doing to perfect ourselves in our sport, and I realize that in life in general, that just doesn't work. When I think of sport, it feels like a sprint compared to life. Life feels like a marathon. And one thing I realize is perfection will lead to burnout really quickly. So if you bring perfection into your life, oh man, like you just might get exhausted with the fact that you're not seeing progress. Oftentimes when we're in a season, we're seeking perfection within that season. So it's a set period of time. We know when the first game is, we know when the potential last game is, and we're working to perfect in that season. But life is just this long, more so expansive event that we're going through, that we're living through. And so when you're seeking out perfection in life, there is no real finish line that we're working towards. I think the idea of consistency is way more sustainable in life than perfection. You want to be consistent about showing up to things. You want to be consistent about getting better at things. You want to be consistently just improving, but you don't want to be striving for perfection. Those are 2 different things. A good example of this is if you want a raise or promotion, you're not going to be evaluated on perfection. You're going to be evaluated on how you are consistently getting better and consistently meeting marks. It's not about perfection. And so oftentimes I think people in the world in general understand that perfection isn't a real thing, but in athletics it's something that we vaguely strive for. And so as you're transitioning into just your life after sport, removing perfection and replacing it with consistency can be really, really helpful in making sure that you are actually enjoying your life and enjoying what is like the progress that you're making and celebrating your wins, because you can look at the small gains rather than being upset that you haven't reached your bigger goal because you're striving for perfection. The next thing that we learn in sports that doesn't translate very well into the rest of your life is pushing off your emotions. Oftentimes, if you're heading into a practice as a college athlete or just an athlete in general, and you've had a really hectic day, you may be struggling with a few thoughts, and you're just trying to like really wrap your head around what's going on in your life. You're often told to put everything that's going on in your life on a shelf as you go to practice so you can focus in on practice. And that's really useful there. Like you really need to zone in and make sure that you're fully present in practice. But often what would happen is after practice, I would look at those things that I put on the shelf and be like, I'll get to those later. And later became almost never. And often that led to something super toxic down the road where I had to really grapple through these emotions that had been piling up for months that I hadn't addressed. I think the biggest reason why this isn't helpful moving into the rest of your life is because, again, just like in the last point, sports is just a small window of time. So you can easily set your emotions on the shelf for a game and then kind of get back to them later. But in life, if you continue to set your emotions on the shelf, eventually you will end up having these like breakdowns that I had mentioned. There's counseling and psychological research that confirms the fact that you do need to process your emotions as they come, or as closely to when you experience them as you can, because the more you push them off, the more they build on each other. While this may not be something that's natural to you as a former athlete, I really do think that you should take the time to maybe seek help in this area, maybe get a counselor or work with a psychologist to make sure that you are processing your emotions in the best way possible for you, because I have been there where I haven't processed my emotions, and when they all come out at one time, it's never a good time for that to happen, and you feel like you may be like spinning out of control, like you may be losing it a little bit, and that's just not a fun feeling. So if you can work through those things early before you have this breakdown, I think it could be really beneficial. But all in all, you should just really be focusing on processing through your emotions as they happen rather than putting them on the shelf for later. So the last thing that we often learn in sports but does not translate very well into the rest of your life is sports version of toughness. I think this showed up a lot during the Olympics, specifically around Simone Biles stepping out of events that were really important to her for her mental health. I think oftentimes when you're on a team, you're told to put yourself aside for the betterment of the team, sacrifice kind of what you want for what is best for the team. And that is awesome. And that works really well in team settings for, the short period of time for the season that you're in there. It's one of those things where you cannot pour from an empty cup. So if you continue to put yourself on the back burner, you will eventually not have the capacity to show up for yourself and for other people like you want to. Outside of putting yourself on the back burner for the betterment of the team, this could also look like playing through injury when you don't necessarily need to. Or I think this also happens oftentimes when you're playing through mental health issues. So for example, Simone Biles decided not to go into some of her events because she felt like her mental health was not in a good place. I think oftentimes in sports, we don't feel like we have the space to do that, specifically as college athletes. I know I didn't always feel like I had, or I really never felt like I had the space to go and talk to my coach about how I don't really think I should be in this practice today because I am extremely overwhelmed. I can't really focus on this stuff. And I just need a mental health day. There isn't a lot of space for that in sports. And I don't know too many coaches that would allow for it without there being major repercussions. Ultimately, outside of sport, and even sometimes in sport, that idea, that sports definition of toughness can be kind of toxic. And so I think switching that definition to be more you-focused is really important as you move into the rest of your life. By you-focused, I mean making the tough decision to choose yourself first. That means advocating for yourself. That means taking the mental health day when you need one. That means listening to your body. That's so important because ultimately I think the sports definition of toughness is great, again, for that short period of time, but to really endure life, this long season of life that we are in, you really need to choose yourself first so that you can continue to show up for yourself later as well as for other people. So those are the 3 that I came up with, but I'm sure there are so many more. So if there's one that you can think of something that you learned in your sport that does not translate or has not translated very well into the rest of your life, please leave a comment down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss a video from me. I post on Thursdays and some Sundays, and you can get content very similar to this, talking about athletics, life after sport, the transition, all that good stuff around sports and being a retired college athlete. If you're interested in that, please, again, subscribe and hit the bell notification, and I cannot wait to talk to you guys next week.